class. I'm your host, Brady Coulter. Today we're talking about the Vietnam War. The Cold War was the name of the conflict that took place after World War II between communism and capitalism, namely their biggest proponents, the USSR and the United States. The two sides couldn't fight each other directly because of the nuclear weapons they had, so they had to fight each other through other countries to gain control.
During World War II, Japan invaded Vietnam, which had been under French administration since the late 19th century. Inspired by the Chinese and Soviet Union communist leader, Ho Chi Minh and his followers wanted to fight both Japanese and French colonial rule. Japan withdrew its forces in 1945, which left the French rule up until 1954, where the Viet Minh won the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. Following this is a ceasefire agreement which allowed Vietnam to be separated at the 17th parallel.
In 1946, France announced their intent to take the rest of Vietnam and started bombing the port of Haiphong. The French tried to appease the South by giving them independence, but in reality, the Vietnamese cannot do anything without French permission. France appointed a new ruler by the name of Bao Dai, who was supported by the capitalist West, with Ho Chi Minh in the north supported by the communist East. In 1953, France sent their parachute regiment to fight the Viet Minh. It was thought that they would easily defeat the untrained guerrilla fighters, but in May 1954, the French were attacked, causing them to surrender, and France left within the month.
The Geneva Conference, they ended up agreeing to let Ho Chi Minh rule the north and Bao Dai the south. They would have elections in all of Vietnam within 2 years to help reunify the country, which would have most likely caused the communist rule to take over, with nearly 80% of the population being in favor of it. But these elections never occurred.
In 1955, Ho Chi Minh visited Moscow and accepted Soviet aid, and a few months later, the Republic of South Vietnam was proclaimed with Diem as the first president. The U.S. proclaimed their support by offering military aid.
Miller started to train Viet Minh guerrilla soldiers to go to the south and spread the word of communism. They used a path called the Ho Chi Minh Trail to quickly travel between the north and south because of the thick overgrowth that prevented air surveillance. They were supplied by the now communist China. Much to the surprise of the south, the soldiers were kind and courteous to the villagers. The south was being ruled by a man named Ngao Den Diem. A fanatic Catholic, Diem was not loved by the people. He refused to hold elections and did not support the mostly Buddhist population. Despite this, America still supported him because of the domino theory, which believed that if one country followed communism, the others around it would also fall to it.
After the election did not take place in 1956, the North became much more active in their military and developed guerrilla fighting units in their region, becoming known as the Viet Cong. They got their tactics from a Chinese commander named Gaya, who introduced them after Chinese communists used them against the Chinese Nationalist Party. After the election did not take place in 1956, the North became much more active in their military and developed guerrilla fighting units in their region, becoming known as the Viet Cong. They got their tactics from a Chinese commander named Gaya, who introduced them after Chinese communists used them against the Chinese Nationalist Party.
The U.S. started to worry because of the growing support for communism, so they decided to put a cap on it. So shortly after the Geneva Agreement in 1954, the U.S. started sending more military support to the South Vietnamese. They then also started sending advisors to the country, and by 1961 there were almost 1,500 of them in South Vietnam.
Although the Vietnamese were not as well equipped or trained, they were able to traverse the area and build tunnels which allowed them to outmaneuver and attack by surprise. The North was able to lead many attacks on villages in the South, even if they were protected through their ability to attack fast and retreat quickly as well.
The Vietnamese had a base in Cambodia, and the Prince of Cambodia, Prince Sihanouk, allowed the presidents due to not wanting them drawn into bigger conflicts. Though as the U.S. put more pressure on him, he changed the policy in 1969, saying the communists were no longer welcome. The U.S. took this opportunity to bomb the communists on the border of Vietnam and Cambodia. The operation was known as Operation Menu and only had five members of Congress were informed about this attack.
On August 2, 1964, North Vietnamese torpedo boats allegedly fired upon the USS Madox in the Gulf of Tonkin. Although it is now known that this incident did not happen, it allowed the U.S. Congress to pass a law that is now known as the Tonkin Resolution. It allowed the president to take all action necessary to quell any attacks on American forces.
On January 31st, 1968, 70,000 North Vietnamese troops launched the Tet Offensive, an offensive to attack hundreds of towns and cities in South Vietnam. While initially successful, U.S. South Vietnamese forces pushed back the Viet Cong. However, the damage had been done to U.S. forces. The Tet Offensive showed the American public that the war's end was not in sight and caused them to be against the war.
In the spring of 1975, after U.S. troops had been officially withdrawn, the North Vietnamese launched a devastating offensive that rapidly captured South Vietnamese territory. This eventually culminated with the fall of Saigon as North Vietnamese began to take Saigon, the South Vietnamese capital. Many were afraid that the North would cause a bloodbath in the city. This led to America's carrying out the Operation Frequent Wind, the largest helicopter evacuation in history.
What's up, bros? It's time for my favorite segment, the secret compartment. First, whoa, what is that? Oh my god, what's that coming out of the secret compartment?
During the Vietnam War, there were 2.7 million U.S. troops in Vietnam. At the end of the war, 58,000 recorded American deaths occurred in Vietnam. This number is tiny compared to the 1.3 million Vietnam deaths accounted for. Under Nixon's rule, he withdrew the American troops in 1973.
Gotta make you understand. Never gonna give you up. Never gonna let you down. Never gonna run around and desert you. Never gonna make you cry. Never gonna say goodbye. Never gonna tell a lie and hurt you. We've known each other for so long.
It's a dove! What a coincidence, because that represents the group of people in the 1970s in America that did not want this war to happen. Let me show you their sign. You see that thing? It probably looks familiar to you, because that is the peace sign. These are the people that oppose the war hawks. They are also the same people responsible for Lyndon Baines Johnson not wanting to run for re-election because he knew that he would not win. Instead, they elected Richard Nixon, whose motto was peace with honor. Richard Nixon they also got impeached, so he was not a really good guy. Thanks, that's all in the secret compartment.